In the shadow-drenched corridors of political history, socialism is rarely viewed through a single lens. To understand its machinery, we must adopt a forensic perspective, a high-stakes investigation into the gears of economics and the ghosts of philosophy. This is a forensic reconstruction of a system that attempted to turn the absolute truth of human justice into a predictive laboratory science. We're looking at the cold calculations and the hidden structures. It began as a moral epiphany, a utopian dream of absolute truth and justice. Thinkers like Saint-Simon and Fourier sought to build a new world from the mind alone before the material dirt of history got in the way. But in 1880, Friedrich Engels shifted the narrative. He argued these dreams were crude theories, born from the crude conditions of early capitalism. The breakthrough came when he and Marx applied the dialectical method. They asserted that history isn't moved by ideas, but by the relentless, cold movement of matter and production. History, they claimed, was a process governed by universal laws as rigid as those of physics. They claimed to have uncovered the secret, surplus value, the revelation of how wealth is extracted from the labor of the proletariat. The gears of capitalism were being exposed for all to see. Our first case file, the Soviet Union, a 70-year experiment in totalizing state control, the archetype of the command economy, where everything was planned from a central shadowed hall. Following the 1917 October Revolution, Lenin transitioned from war communism to a brief, pragmatic, new economic policy. But the shadows were lengthening as the system's rigidity began to take hold. Stalin's rise brought a definitive shift. Forced industrialization and the brutal machinery of collectivization. Millions were forced into collective farms, a process that triggered the devastating Holodomor famine. Millions of peasants were forced into collective farms, a process that triggered the devastating Holodomor famine, claiming millions of lives. The model succeeded in transforming an agrarian society into a nuclear superpower and a spacefaring nation by 1957. But rigidity led to stagnation. The nomenklatura, the party elite, became a new class, watching as the gears began to seize. The dream was becoming a bureaucratic nightmare in the shadows. Gorbachev's reforms of openness and restructuring unintentionally dismantled the party's control. By 1991, the Union formally dissolved, and the great Soviet machine ground to a final silent halt. Chapter 2. China, a two-act drama of ideological radicalism and pragmatic marketization. A system in constant flux, where the revolution was never allowed to sleep. Mao's Great Leap Forward sought to bypass traditional industry. It resulted in the Great Chinese Famine, a tragedy where millions perished in the pursuit of a radical industrial shortcut. The Cultural Revolution followed, seeking to purge capitalist roaders and destroying the nation's institutional fabric. The air was thick with suspicion and the fear of the invisible enemy. After Mao, Deng Xiaoping initiated reform and opening up. He famously said, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white so long as it catches mice." The pragmatist stepped out of the shadows. Special economic zones like Shenzhen were created to attract foreign capital. This socialist market economy has lifted 800 million out of poverty, creating a neon-lit frontier of state-led capitalism. Today, the state retains control over the commanding heights, banking, and energy, while fostering a massive, relentless private sector. A paradoxical mix of control and market chaos. Chapter 3. The Frankfurt School. They moved the investigation from the factory floor to the psyche. They realized the revolution had stalled because the culture industry had colonized the human mind. Adorno and Horkheimer warned of instrumental reason. the cold, calculative logic of efficiency that turns people into objects. Reason, they argued, had become a tool for a new kind of domination. Herbert Marcuse described the one-dimensional man, trapped in a cycle of false needs and consumerist distraction. The system didn't need a police state. It had the culture industry to keep the peace. Their critical theory was a forensic tool to uncover the hidden structures of power. They sought to repoliticize everyday life, to find the cracks in the administered society where freedom might still breathe. Chapter 4: Latin America and the Pink Tide. A 21st century investigation into the quest for a new kind of socialism. A movement built on cultural identity and the transformation of the state from within. Leaders like Chavez and Morales rejected Western-centric developmentalism. They codified buen vivir, living well, into their constitutions, prioritizing ecological harmony over the cold logic of capitalist efficiency. This was Marcuse's great refusal in action, a coalition of the outsiders, indigenous groups, landless peasants, and the urban poor, rejecting the entire capitalist way of life that had excluded them for centuries. They understood that the battle was for cultural hegemony. Attempts to break the corporate monopoly on truth and create a counter-hegemonic public sphere were the front line of their revolution. The struggle was between redistribution of wealth and the recognition of identity. Morales's Bolivia was a masterpiece of both, recognizing 36 indigenous nations while nationalizing the natural gas that fueled the nation. But Adorno's pessimism loomed. Every victory carries the seeds of new domination. By taking state power, these movements often recreated the very administered society they were designed to oppose. Chapter 5: Yugoslavia's Third Way. A decentralized investigation where power was moved to workers' councils. Individual factories managed by those who worked them, sharing the profits of their own labor. Tito leveraged his position between East and West, leading the non-aligned movement. But the model struggled with internal competition and parochialism. The gears were competing instead of cooperating. After Tito's death, mounting foreign debt and ethnic tensions led to a violent breakup. The Third Way experiment ended in a tragedy of blood and borders, lost to the shadows of history. Chapter 6: The Israeli Kibbutzim, a rare, long-term case of voluntary communalism. Founded on the principle, from each according to ability, to each according to needs. No state iron fist, just collective will. For decades, property was shared, children lived in communal houses, and life was an egalitarian dream. But the economic crises of the 80s forced a transition to privatization and renewed models. Chapter 7: The Nordic Model. Often mistaken for pure socialism, it's a mixed economy pairing capitalism with a massive safety net. A tripartite cooperation between government, employers, and labor. High taxes fund universal healthcare and education, built on a foundation of profound social trust. But aging populations and shifting demographics are testing the limits of this high-trust machine. A transdisciplinary look reveals that success correlates with voluntarism and decentralization. The human element is the ghost in the machine that planners often ignore. The Soviet failure stemmed from the calculation problem. Without market prices, planners could not efficiently allocate resources. The system was blind to the needs of the very people it sought to serve. The elite paradox, where a new class, the nomenklatura, eventually finds interest in transitioning to capitalism to secure their own power. The revolution's leaders become its liquidators. Today, the second pink tide and the digital periphery seek a new synthesis. Intersectional crises, climate change, gender, and racial justice, are the new battlefields for a critical socialism. Modern theorists argue for a micro-level transformation. Worker self-directed enterprises, where workers act as their own board of directors. A revolution at the level of the individual desk and machine. The stakes are underscored by deepening inequality. The gap between the lives we could have and the lives we have got persists, fueling the demand for new, radical models. Socialism remains a quest for emancipation, a critique of alienation in a totally administered world. It is the story of a humanity trying to find its own voice in the shadows. Adorno's melancholy reminds us that every victory is fragile. The struggle is not just for the state, but for the soul and the culture. The investigation into the science of changing society remains open. As long as the internal contradictions of the current order become unbearable, the old mole will continue to burrow, surfacing in new forms wherever justice is denied. We leave the investigation here, but the forensic gaze remains. The question is not just what system we live under, but what it means to be a human subject in a world of machines. The investigation into socialism is a journey into our own contradictions. It is a quest that may never truly end, as long as the shadows of history continue to haunt our dreams. If you followed this forensic report to its end, join our community of investigators. Hit the thanks button, like, and subscribe for our next high-stakes investigation into the human condition. The case remains open. The files are always being updated. Stay vigilant and stay questioning. Until our next case, the shadows are where the truth hides. This has been a forensic reconstruction of socialism, a high-stakes investigation into the systems that shape our lives. Thank you for being part of the search for truth.